Hello everybody and welcome to our today's webinar with Migration Center and with Box today with the title Simplify Your Content Migration from Legacy ECM Systems to Box. Before we start, let me do a quick slide of housekeeping. Please note that all attendees are muted during the whole session. If there are any questions or inquiries or remarks, please take a look at your GoToWebinar panel. You can either enter them into the questions box or the chat box, and we will collect those and answer them in a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Please also note that this webinar is being recorded, and we will share it with you after the session once it's been processed. Okay, let's do a quick introduction for today's speakers. Our guest speaker today is Florian Hahaus from Box. He's the Vice President for Channels and Alliances in EMEA. We also have two speakers from FME US. First up, Frank Dentrone, the President, and also Nigel Whitehead, the COO. From FME AG from Germany is Florian Piaszekensen, our Director of FME Products. And then my humble self, Mark Olscher, I'm responsible for the product marketing here at FME. Our plan for today, 6 points. First off, Florian will start with a high-level introduction about Box, after which we will then go into the interesting facts about our FME group. And then we will talk about why Box and FME join forces. And then Frank will go into the migration services for sensitive data in complex environments. After which our Florian will then go and talk about Migration Center, our product for content migrations. And finally, we will round it off with a Q&A session in which all your questions can be answered. So I hope you enjoy our webinar. And with that, I would like to hand over to Florian from Box.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much for that introduction. And welcome also from my side. My name is Florian Hahaus. From Box, and I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes or so just taking you through an overview of the Box platform and specifically what sort of problems that we solve for our customers and why it is that we're working with FME to help on this migration piece. Yes, here we go. So I've got control. So 10 minutes, quick overview on Box. So our mission is to power how the world works together. We do that for about 90,000 customers, big and small. We are particularly strong and focused in the sort of highly compliant industries, so hence also a focus on working with the likes of FME, particularly around the healthcare and pharmaceutical space. We're also very strong in the financial services, insurance, and government sectors. And it's really where we tend to play is at the intersection of those compliance-driven industries on the one hand, but on the other hand, where there is a strong need to move more into the cloud for both internal and external reasons, and to really, help our customers transition into the, into the digital space, digital transformation. Three real sort of drivers as we see it to help, to drive the digital transformation. One is obviously as companies, as organizations come under increasing pressures from both from below and from across and from different industries to be more competitive, to be more agile. And there is a need to just be faster. I remember a great quote, actually it was a CEO of Coca-Cola in Germany who said it used to be that the big companies would take out the small companies, and now actually he said it's the fast companies that take out the slow companies. So that speed is super important. I think the other thing is as a new generation of workers enter the workplace, they have certain expectations. Those expectations are around accessing, accessing any information on any device, ideally in the way that they're used to working, which is easy, intuitive, mobile, of course, mobile first in many cases. And then thirdly, and kind of at odds with the second one, is this ever-increasing need for security and privacy. And so those are sort of the three key drivers that we look to address as our customers and as our prospects move into the cloud. And then the other thing is, and this is really what I want to focus on next, is that as people move into the cloud, obviously, there are some really strong benefits in doing so, but actually it does also potentially create even more silos. So if we take a step back for a second, or rather down a level, and look at actually just follow a piece of content, right? Let's say, for instance, you are generating a contract of sale an actual piece of paper, sorry, an actual document. You might generate that, the legal firm might generate it in Office 365. They may store that in OneDrive. That may sit on Azure and leverage the artificial intelligence that's embedded in that. You may then work on that through the G Suite. You may then store that information in G Drive, which will then have its own artificial intelligence engine driving that. Once that's ready for signing, that may then go into the DocuSign system, which again may well store that in its own proprietary document management repository. It may then have a third party doing the analytics on that data. It may then live, for the time being at least, in the CRM system, let's say Salesforce, which again has its own repository, has its own artificial intelligence, and then eventually, if it's part of a major, of a large very compliance-driven industry or company, it may then reside on-premise in a more traditional on-premise system like OpenText, Alfresco, or fime. As we know, though, typically content doesn't travel vertically, it tends to travel horizontally. And what then ends up happening is that in order to collaborate and work on these documents, actually it ends up being email, right? Pragmatically, and probably also from our own experience, quite often when we're looking for a piece of content, the first place we look at our own attachments, our own email archives. And that clearly isn't the way to operate in a highly compliant, highly security conscious or driven organization or industry if you want to create a holistic platform for your content. So that's kind of where Box fits in. So our mission really is to try and, to be that platform, and increasingly for our customers, that's exactly what we're doing, to be that single point of truth, that single point of repository for all these different, pieces of cloud content. And either also, depending on the industry, depending on the customer, also be that a repository for the archiving and the publishing and the compliance piece, or we can certainly dock onto what's already available. And that's really one of the reasons why we're working very closely with FME, is to make sure that we can leverage what's already there so that we can have a best-of-breed approach to your content strategy. And then, of course, having everything in one repository means that you have, a layer of security, compliance, but also workflow, intelligence, and so on. And then you can choose which artificial intelligence provider you then want to help you work with that content in a more intelligent way and help, drop it into workflows and start driving entirely new ways of actually, driving your business. You can choose from the Azure stack, Google, IBM, or Amazon, as well as some of our own out-of-the-box AI capabilities. So if we take that down a level into some more specific, we provide that platform that's integrated with about 1,400 different providers where you can generate or access the content from. We do that through our APIs. We provide the obvious layer of content, metadata, collaboration, all the stuff that you would expect, plus also workflow and intelligence. And then there's another whole layer of compliance, encryption, governance, and so on, to make sure that the content is completely secure and compliant as is required for your industries. On top of that, we then also obviously provide our own interface into the system. So there are also Box proprietary applications that you can use to access your content. And then if that is not enough, then you can also then build your own applications. So for instance, FME has built a gateway into OpenText and also in a migration tool using our APIs. And there are lots and lots of other examples where companies have done that as well. So really it's kind of a platform layer to really bring together all the different content in your organization, so that then if we go back to the example previously, if you're creating a sales contract, for instance, as in this example, the editor in this case becomes irrelevant, right? Or it becomes unimportant. So as a CTO, you can say to your users, look, which is very different to what it was in the past, right? Instead of saying, look, you've got to use Microsoft for everything, but less focuses on where the content actually ends up, you can actually turn around and say, actually, you know what? You can use the editor of choice. Doesn't really matter whether you access it through Google, Microsoft, DocuSign, Salesforce, Quip, what have you, iWork, as long as the content resides in Box, right? Because then we know it's compliant, we can control it, we can archive it, we can do what we need to do, we can manage the retention policies and so on, just to make sure that we're all completely compliant, and we can control who has got access to what, for how long, when, on what devices. And then not only that, so that's, we can take it further, because when we then apply the artificial intelligence and the workflow engines, we can then start using that content once it is digitized and available we can then start using it to drive entirely different business processes, right? So even getting into sort of B2C kind of applications through wealth management portals or medical trials and so on, again, where that sort of high compliance meets the, the need to really collaborate well beyond your own firewall. And then, as I mentioned before, we then have this whole layer around security to make sure that whatever we do is completely compliant for your industry. So we're GXP compliant, HIPAA compliant, GDPR compliant, and we can provide the audit trails and all the functionality to make sure that that you can manage your business in the way that's right for your industry. We also have the data residency in all the key markets. So that, and that is sort of just coming to the end here, just so, and really just addressing the question, why FME and Box? It's with FME, we can take that whole notion even further of, combining on the one hand this need to collaborate, as I said, well beyond the firewall, all the way out to our customers or patient or what, the end customer, whoever the end customer is, on the one hand. And on the other hand, there's need for control, compliance, and security, because previously those things have been a little bit mutually exclusive. And if you look at sort of how the market maps onto that, if we sort of say, okay, internal, external, and B2C on the collaboration side on the vertical axis, and then we look at low to medium to high on control and compliance and security, traditionally, technologies like G Drive, OneDrive, Dropbox, often through Shadow IT even, have been very, very good at doing that external collaboration, but is lacking to some extent some of those compliance and security functionalities. On the other hand, you've got SharePoint, OpenText, Documentum, Alfresco, and FileMat that are very, very strong in the compliance and control and security aspects, but typically more difficult to collaborate externally. Our goal together with FME is to really sort of, take our customers, oops, I'm trying to get, there we go. FME plus Box can help us build on that sort of on-premise install base and really surface some of that content up in a very secure way out into externally facing collaboration applications. So for instance, collaborating directly with medical trial participants through an app, for instance, or collaborating with agencies on marketing and promotional material, which again is very subject to a lot of auditing and a lot of compliance as well, making sure that all the side effects and everything else are being mentioned in the right way. And some of it, if it's new products, also very secure, but typically, externally facing collaboration as well. And that's kind of, so that's sort of in a very, very short period is kind of where we play, where most of our customers and applications and use cases tend to be. It's more at that sort of top end, external collaboration, both with suppliers, stakeholders, partners, and eventually also customers in a highly controlled, secure, compliant environment. And then no presentation would ever be complete without one of these. So I'll just finish off on that. Box also, very well regarded in this space, not just, by our customers, our partners, and ourselves, but also by Gartner, the independent analyst. And with that, I will hand over to my friends and colleagues from FME.
Thank you, Florian. This is Nigel White, and I'm the COO of FME here in the US. And I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about the FME group and how we came to create the partnership with Box and really what that means to our mutual customers. So number of you may be familiar with FME. Hopefully you are. If not, then we'll change that if you're not familiar with us. But essentially, we focus on digital transformation for our customers, primarily in the life sciences and industrial manufacturing verticals, although it's not limited to that. We do a lot of consulting, development, maintenance, product development, professional services. And our focus areas tend to be around what is traditionally known as enterprise content management, perhaps better termed content services, business intelligence, cloud solutions, social collaboration, all of these components, of course, part of digital transformation for many of our customers. We were founded in '95, so 20 plus years, getting up there now, getting of age, and our employee base continues to grow. And every time, of course, you put one of these slides together, you're hopeful that the numbers are somewhat low, and these are. So we're growing, which is great news. We are truly an international company. We have offices in Germany, Romania, and the United States, and do a lot of international projects, whether they be somewhat global in nature, regional. We have obviously customers in those verticals that require global deployments. So very important component of FME's business is in that international arena. So just to expand on that a little bit, without getting into too much detail, really just a pictorial view of what I just explained, which is we focus on two main verticals. We have interest in other verticals, and that's an expansion area for us, and focus on, I would say, four. We can break it out into four areas: enterprise content management, business intelligence, custom software development, which we do, and of course social collaboration. Big ones, cloud and big data, very important, of course. So we're focused on these main areas. Our business really comes in the form of consulting, and of course the FME product suite, primarily Migration Center, which Frank and Florian are going to talk about in a few minutes. But again, that's a pictorial view of where we actually play in the market. So to summarize that, and then I'll move on to the Box relationship. We're very involved in digital transformation in various shapes and forms and types of projects that we do. Document migration is a key component of that, a major component in what we do. From a life sciences and pharmaceutical perspective, we are very pleased to be able to say that we work with 80% of the top 10 and 60% of the top 30 pharmaceutical companies with respect to our Migration Center product and the services we provide around that, again, which Florian and Frank will talk about shortly. We have been focusing on the area of life sciences for many, many years now, and kind of grew up in the age of content management through the Documentum area. And of course, as many of you know, that has expanded, and companies such as Box have made a significant impact in that space in the last 2 or 3 years, which is one of the reasons that we're partnering with them. We do many, many migration projects, some impressive numbers here, I think you'll see, and we've done over 200 of those in the life sciences industry. So digital transformation, multiple verticals, consulting, products, lots of migration work, and Box is becoming an important part of that. So I'll spend a few minutes talking about how we came to partner with Box and the importance of that. So about a year ago, we kind of assessed the market and looked at the kind of what I call the strategic vendors, the platform vendors in the content services, enterprise content management space, and clearly Box had made an impact. I think many of you will know that they've sold considerable numbers of seats to large pharmaceutical companies, and Florian a few moments ago spoke about some of the key reasons why companies are choosing Box. So we engaged some dialogue with Box about a year ago now, and decided there was an important role for FME to play with Box in terms of expanding their solution and our services to our customers. I think one of the key parts of that, certainly for regulated industries, was the Box GXP announcement, which came probably 9 months ago, maybe a little bit more, but that really showed Box's commitment to regulated markets and was a very important step for us in furthering our relationship with them. So there's really 3 areas, and this is not unique to FME, but 3 areas where FME saw increasing in strategic value that Box was starting to impact in the life sciences industry. And for those of you that are somewhat familiar with Box's strategy, they are very, very focused on ISVs, so independent software vendors who are building applications to support business processes in regulated industries. So obviously that in itself attracts our interest given our life sciences pedigree. And as part of that, as customers do adopt Box increasingly strategically across their enterprise, migration to the Box platform is becoming increasingly critical. As many of you know that are involved in content management solutions, moving from a platform and ensuring that data and documents are migrated effectively to support the business is becoming and has been for some time actually, a major piece of the projects, those implementation projects. So as if you're familiar with Migration Center, we have a concept of source and targets when we're doing those migrations, and Frank will talk about those a little bit later. And so we saw an opportunity to support our customers in those migrations by creating what we call a Box adapter that would facilitate these complex migrations. And again, I won't steal Florian's thunder here, but that's a process we went through last year. And he can talk about the outcome of that. But clearly an adapter to support our customers in those migrations was certainly a target for us. And from a consulting perspective, you will notice that if you study the market as we do and our customers do, that there are an increasing number of ISVs that have adopted Box as their core platform for, I'll say, business focus. So ISVs in terms of maybe in the quality space and the clinical regulatory space are adopting Box as a platform. And clearly in the best interest of our customers, we've engaged with some of these ISVs to look at creating partnerships to help them deploy their solutions as a systems integrator and a consulting organization. And those discussions are going very well. And we hope to have some news for you shortly on that. So they're the kind of key reasons. Fundamentally, Box is a significant player in the life sciences market. It's also obviously not just in life sciences, it's in many other verticals too. So while we've looked at an adapter for migrations, we're also doing some work outside of just the pure adapter concept and requirement. And you'll see from this slide that I think this is one that Florian touched on briefly. FME Group is looking at, and is certainly involved in already, creating a number of what I'll call custom apps, not particularly to compete with the ISVs, but to create added value solutions in terms of custom applications that can support customers in some of these areas. So this is another area that's important to us, and I'll let you read these components here. I won't go through them specifically, but there's a very good opportunity for companies like FME, not only to work on migration, but also on applications that customers don't have today, and they'd like to leverage Box. Content Pass is one, SOP management's another. We've looked at contract management. We're looking at the Box CLI. So two components really, the whole migration process that we're going to talk about in a moment, the custom apps. So two main areas that FME is focusing on, and I think this shows that Box is an important partner for us, and we hope to expand that partnership moving forward. So I mentioned Frank and the migration services, and I think after Frank, Florian's going to talk about the adapter, but let me hand over at this point to Frank, and he can talk you through some more detail around our migration services.
Okay, thanks Nigel. So hello everyone. As my intro earlier in the session, I'm Frank Dentron. My role at FME is president, one of the shareholders and founders of the US practice, which wasn't mentioned, but we founded it in 2010. So just in case you were not aware of that. So today I'm going to focus on the segment of migration services, really around sensitive data or these complex environments. The lion's share of what we do, or that we spend most of our time working in regulated industries, for example, life sciences or pharma or med device and others, where there's a variety of different types of data, intellectual property, confidential data like patient information, et cetera. So we're very versed in understanding, what those complex, the definition of complex environments, and I'll get into a little bit of that detail in the next few minutes, is around the type of data we're migrating, the type of metadata that surrounds that information in terms of, master data or enriched metadata that puts context to that content. I mean, all of that is part of the whole migration, service, if you will, which I'm gonna get further into the details of that in the next coming slides. So let's go to the next slide here. Oops, I gotta go back one. There we go. So just want to give you a little picture and summary of, FME's services portfolio. I'm going to focus mostly on the migration services, which is kind of highlighted in red, but just want to give you a sense of, who we are and what we do on the grand scheme of things. We're focusing on migration in this segment, but as I mentioned, we do provide that end-to-end migration service, to our clients. Typically, we're asked to handle the whole migration workstream in its entirety, where there's an initiative, there's a business application being implemented, as Nigel mentioned, like from an ISV, which we may or may not be involved. As we're developing those relationships and partnerships, we're going to be working more into those vertical areas in terms of our expertise in life sciences. But for today, I want to focus on what we bring to the table in terms of the migration, where we do, project-based, that end-to-end responsibility of that migration, as well as developing best practice or kind of a repeatable process, like a migration factory where customers have segments of data that they want to bring in, or M&A activity where they're bringing in data from an acquired assets, and we put together a kind of a factory model where it's repeatable and more operationalized. In addition to that, when I talk about that end-to-end, we cover, the migration strategy. We look at data quality, data enrichment, all the way through the execution of the data migration, as well as the data verification process. Because we do work predominantly in these regulated industries, that data verification or validation is extremely important. So those are the types of things that we do. We do want to call out, we do work in other industries outside of life science, but again, from a migration point of view, and a lot of those are still regulated, like financial services, insurance, and energy. So we do have customers in those areas. Again, regulated content, same use case, bit of a different data set, but the same end-to-end migration services is provided, right, to those types of engagements with our customers. So we go to the next slide. There we go. So why FME? Why consider FME's migration portfolio, and more importantly, our product, which Florian's going to cover in more detail. At the end of the day, our position in the market is that our goal is to bring our expertise to the table, our products, our services, understanding of these complex data migrations where, customers are, like I said earlier, they're acquiring assets through M&A, or they're replatforming, consolidating and replatforming to, for example, Box platform. So what we bring is those best practices, our software, our experience, and with these things combined, we're bringing, that cost savings, or where we believe we can save our clients cost in terms of overall spend, also time duration, because we're leveraging our software. It's not some tailored customized scripting. We're bringing this product to the table with our portfolio, migration services portfolio, to really bring that customer and their vision to the future state platform like Box is what we're bringing to the table. So let's go to the next slide. So here's our migration services kind of overall. And I touched on some of this, but where we have our migration center software in the center, FME, our professional services organization, is really bringing all of these different aspects or elements as part of the overall offering, where we do provide analysis and planning, which is extremely important when you're looking at different data sets, certain volumes. Data sets could be hundreds of thousands or millions of records that has some data is enriched, some is not. So there's a variety of opportunities with our offering and our product where we can bring in that level of data enrichment to get the end game, the end result that the clients are after. We do POCs, of course. We also cover project management or change management as part of the engagement. Again, depending on the opportunity that we're working on and the customer and the engagement, we could bring that to the table, and we do that in many of our customers. There are cases where customers have proprietary systems that are not like the ECM platforms that you see in the market, on, like, for example, Gartner, the Magic Quadrant, et cetera. So we do and have done custom connectors, if you will, to take our product. We extend our adapter framework, and we're able to connect to that source system and bring in that data set. But we do have, which Florian's going to cover on the FME side, a variety of source adapters that we already have on the market today. So, again, if there is something that we don't offer now, we do have that capability to extend our framework and consume that data that's in question. We also cover, from a monitoring and reporting, so as part of the strategy and methodology, as we do these data migrations from the different source systems to a Box platform, for example, having the ability to kind of sample and report on the data verification because of those regulated, engagements that we're involved in. That data verification is extremely important, and that's part of our portfolio and part of our methodology. And we have tooling that supports that process of the engagement. So in a nutshell, all of these items really round out our full service and are part of these, complex data migrations that we're involved in. But what we bring to the table is take that complexity and not make that complex to our clients. So those are the things that we bring to the table, and we take on that piece of the work stream, the migration initiative, sort of that end-to-end to mitigate that risk for our clients. Let's go to the next slide. So here's kind of at a glance how we execute on these migrations, and like I said, Florian's going to cover a bit more on the details of the product itself. But from a migration strategy and approach, these elements that you see on the screen is kind of you could consider it like a workflow or a process flow. When we look at a data set from a source, we analyze that information. So that's part of that, what we call a scanning process. So we analyze the source data set, we pull it in, we decouple it from the source system, and we bring it into our Migration Center product. And at that point, we have the ability to analyze it, look for, organize that data set into manageable chunks of information or logical chunks. For example, the data set has clinical documents, safety documents, or contracts, or SOPs, or whatever it may be. We're able to disseminate that data set, in that analysis phase, and we put that in an organized fashion, what we call this organized bucket, where we break it into these manageable sets. We call those migration sets. Once we have that information analyzed and organized, that's where we go through a transformation process, where we look at different rules, we look at the metadata and criteria that's been collected out of the source system, and we're able to develop, through configuration, it's part of our software, mapping rules, which can take information from the source and map that to the future state solution, the Box application, for example, based on the required metadata that the Box application requires, right? So there's a bit of metadata transformation and mapping. There's enrichment, because there's a variety of regular expression capabilities and data enrichment capabilities in the transformation process. And once that meets the need of the future state, platform in question and application, the Box application, at that point we could validate the data set in Migration Center, and then make any corrective measures, because before we load that data, we have the ability to review and identify any particular transformation issues, where data sets, if you're looking at hundreds and thousands of records, there might be some data quality areas that need to be adjusted, but we could uncover those in the transformation process and validation process. And once we identify those errors or transformation rule changes that are necessary, we do that in that sort of correction phase. And then at that point, we have a clean data set that has the transformation rules that are necessary to load that into the particular box application. And then we would trigger the import process, and that's where it pushes the data set into the, the box application, where we can manage, all the versions of content, on the metadata, et cetera. So the dependencies that are required on the box application, we can enforce that in the transformation and mapping rules in the migration process. So again, all of this can happen in parallel. We can, we have scaling capabilities where a lot of this stuff can run in parallel to get the throughput necessary. So those are the types of things that we do, and we cover that part of that migration upfront process, where we do the migration analysis and strategy and migration implementation strategy, where we cover that kind of timeline, manageable data sets, et cetera, et cetera. So that's all part of that service that we bring as part of our migration services portfolio. So I think with that said, I'm going to hand this over to Florian from FME, and he's going to get a little deeper into the Migration Center product itself.
Great, thank you, Frank. So my name is Florian Piatzek-Hansen. So I'm 15 years with FME now. So I'm responsible for the whole product business at FME Group. And my part today is to give you a little bit more details about the product. It's really just a high-level overview. And I will start with a little bit with the history. So Migration Center is on the market since 2005 now, so a couple of years. And we started with classic ECM applications and migrations in that area. So and over the last 14 years, we increased our portfolio in terms of supported platforms. So and one, as mentioned, is Box. And just to give you an idea what kind of, let's say, challenges or use cases we address, especially in terms of Box, we have this landscape here, which give you a good idea of the different areas we address. So it starts typically with a classic migration piece. So that means migrating legacy solutions like pharmaceutical solutions or financial solutions to Box, and also help customers to onboard, let's say, customers, for example, from a file share to the Box cloud. So there's another area which is typically, let's say, related to M&As. So that's the consolidation area. So typically after acquisition, for example, of a company, typically organizations find themselves in a situation where they have a lot of different applications and technologies within the organization. And with Migration Center, we can help customers to, let's say, get rid of all this different, let's say, platforms and technologies, and create a kind of, let's say, box-based single technology strategy by migrating all the different applications to one single repository. So we also help customers to extend the Box platform within the organization with Migration Center. So that means, for example, as I mentioned, onboarding file shares, or let's say, migrating third-party products to Box or third-party platforms. So, and also, of course, replacing outdated applications, for example. So, and there's a couple of other use cases we address, like test data management. So, for example, if you implement a new application, typically you need some test data, which needs to be really close to the productive data for example, user acceptance tests. So, Migration can help here as well to isolate the, let's say, not classified documents and move them to a test system. So from the productive to a test system. And also we are able to, let's say, create a kind of scheduled batch import. So to synchronize, for example, a file share to the Box cloud, or from other platforms to Box as well. So that's all the use cases we address typically. So, and you may ask yourself, why should you use Migration Center? As the speakers before mentioned, so it's our product. It's really an 100% out-of-the-box product. It's used by our professional service organization, but also by our customers. And it comes with with a lot of functionalities, and it helps customers especially to do migrations without additional programming or scripting effort. So currently we have about 500 active customers and have done thousands of projects around the world, 14 years now on the market, and we support 440 plus migration passes from multiple platforms. And also we create a couple of capabilities which helps customers, for example, to execute migrations without system downtime. That's always a really big issue for our customers, especially if they have 24/7 applications. So to find the right window to migrate all those data, and we can help customers to reduce this window really to a minimum and do migrations over the weekend with our Delta migration capabilities. But I came to this point later on. So then also, as Frank also mentioned, so we have a transformation engine which is extensible. You can configure this transformation engine, which allows us to first of all neutralize the data from the source platform, then transform the data into the specific structure and object model of the target platform as well. So we also fit for regulated systems. That's a pretty important piece of our software. So everything is stored within our product. It's we have our migration audit trail, which exactly can let's say use to create the transparency of the whole migration process. So it means we store the information once we touch the first time the documents with the metadata, and we can also show what's happened during the migration process and where, for example, the documents was stored at the end. So, and also mentioned by Frank, so the product is fully scalable. So you can install Migration Center on different servers to reach the maximum performance or the required performance for your data migration. So it comes with a flexible price model, and we also certified by different ECM vendors. So we look a little bit about to the architecture. So Migration Center comes with three main components. This is a Windows client, which is the control center. So that means everything it's really based on a client. So there's no XML files or scripting necessary. So, and this control center is mainly for control all the migration phases we saw on Frank's slides, and the jobs and the processes and the transformation rules and stuff like that. So then we have a dedicated database in the middle, which let's say includes the business logic and especially all the performance critical processes like transformation and organization of data. And finally, there's the job server, which, let's say runs all the, let's say, exporting, or as we call it, scan jobs, and the importing jobs to the target system. So in terms of supported source system, we have a couple of source systems which are supported. So for example, we can migrate OpenText Documentum to Box. We can, let's say, migrate the legacy solution FirstDoc to Box, OpenText Content Server or Content Suite to Box, file shares, databases. This is a really powerful connector we have in our portfolio. So the database connector is used for any kind of, let's say, ECM application or custom build application, which has a database underneath. So it's highly configurable, and typically we use those or this connector, for example, to migrate really special customized solution to Box. So we support eRoom, Outlook, and Exchange. We have a really powerful IBM Domino or Notes connector, which allows to migrate nearly any IBM Lotus Notes database to Box. So we can connect to SharePoint, Alfresco, to IBM Content Manager, and Finet IS. So that's a portfolio from the source point of view. As Frank mentioned, so whenever there is a need for a connector, so we can develop those connector based on our API and our framework, or as I mentioned, use the database connector to connect directly to the database of the application. So what make us stands out? I mean, so there are a couple of things. So first of all, we have this powerful transformation engine, which allows you to transform your metadata, your object through the target object model. Let's say we have capabilities to handle really large volumes of data, so hundreds of millions of records. So we have simulation and testing capabilities inside our product, which helps you especially during the validation phase, which Frank mentioned. So we have the central migration database, which allows us to, let's say to create audit trails, to handle all the relations between documents, between data, metadata, access rights, folder structures, and things like that. And also, this central database helps us to execute this successive Delta migration functionalities, which reduce the downtime of a system really to a minimum. So we have this pre-configured or predefined migration approach, also shown by Frank. So that means analyze the source content, organize your migration, transform the objects, validate the result of the transformation, correct errors, and then import the documents into the target system. As I mentioned also, the fit for regulated environments, our migration audit trail, the history database, which shows exactly what's happened during a migration, and finally, the API, which we have in place to build connectors based on our migration platform. And one pretty new piece, which was released by end of last year, is our artificial intelligence classification capabilities. So we build a module which helps customers, for example, to classify documents from a file share and use that new information, this new metadata, to create, let's say, meaningful metadata within the box, within the box environment. Yeah, that's a really short overview about Migration Center. So, and now I will hand over back to Mark, and Mark will give you some more details and also start then the Q&A session.
All right. Thank you to all the speakers for those great insights. And we are about to move on to our Q&A session, as Florian just mentioned, but let me give you a quick note before. Our product, we offer a dedicated website, which is migration-center.com. And on there, you can find all the information you have been introduced today on a high level with much more detail. You can see our product features. You can take a look for references like success stories. And you can also take a look at our service portfolio, our new blog with blog posts about content migration topics. And you can also find past webinars as recorded webinars. And most importantly, you can try out Migration Center for free. The full product, 14 days, just request our free evaluation copy. And then you can see for yourself what the capabilities are capable of. To mention here, as we have FME US on board, you can also take a look at our FME US site. It's fme-us.com. And if you're looking for migration services in Germany, you can also go to the en.fme.de site as well. Remember, it's FME you love to work with. Thank you for attending, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.